So welcome back. Made the body, made most of the neck. Time to think about the fretboard. And what I've got and what you need for an ES345 is a bit of rosewood. You can tell it's rosewood because it stinks. I'm sure some people must like the smell. So you can buy a piece like this, round about the right size. It's too thick, it's about 9mm, it should be about 6mm. So the first thing to do is to bring that down to the right thickness, which is just over 3. I'll probably make it a 6. And I'll make it a little bit wider than that to give me a little bit of room for error. Now I could put this through the planer like I did with the main bit of neck, but it's much more delicate. I don't really want to go putting it through the planer because a slight mistake and you've ruined the whole thing, and it cost me 20 quid this piece. So I want to do it by hand. And just like with anything thin like this, it's very hard to grip anyway. You can try and grip it in a Black & Decker workmate maybe, but it doesn't really stick. So the trick is a bit of double-sided tape. So let's pan you down onto here. Double-sided tape along here. Now you don't want double-sided tape that's too thick, otherwise what will happen is it'll be sort of rocking about when it's on the when it's held down. So stick that. This is Gorilla Tape, will stick to absolutely everything, and then peel the backing off, and I should be able to stick that nicely onto my table like that, and that'll give me a nice flat surface to plane against. We'll start with the plane, and you can see it's just cutting, so that's about what I'm looking for. And I can sort of start to explore the wood, because where there's figuring and stuff in the wood, sometimes the plane can dig in and you want to find out which way those are going. So okay, starting to get a feel for the wood. I'll keep going for a little while and then we'll see what we get. And then at intervals I can just start checking on that depth. So what have I got there? Still 9 on that side, 8.5 on that side, so I'm obviously taking more off than that side. I've got 9.7 and I've got 8.8. So to take more off on this right hand side, a bit more off on this end, so I'll concentrate on that. Then I've got it down by, it's got another millimetre or so to go. I'll fetch it off the bench. What I'm going to do is flip it over and do the other side to make sure I've got 2 nice smooth sides, because I don't want a lumpy side to stick to the neck, and I don't want a lumpy side to play on. So there we are. Now one thing I've found, I usually use this Gorilla double-sided tape, which is really quite strong, but sometimes it's too strong and it can be quite hard to get off. So I've seen on the internet someone is using 2 strips of masking tape and some super glue between them, so then you can pull off the masking tape. So what I'm going to do is give that a try for the other side and see how that goes. So this is the side that I have been planing. Let's get some masking tape and stick it down the middle like that, and then equally I'll put a strip of masking tape on the bench. Get some super glue. This is gel super glue, but I guess any sort would work. Bit of super glue down there. See if this works. And then the hard part, which I guess is lining it up. So there we go. That's lined up. Press that down. Give that a couple of minutes to set. And the theory is masking tape's a lot easier to peel off the bench than the Gorilla tape that I have been using. It's been a few minutes and it does feel pretty solid, so let's give it a try. I'm not sure how long you're supposed to leave it, but let's try it. Okay. Plane's behaving oddly, I think I'm going to have to sharpen it, but that seems to be working. So let me sharpen the plane and I'll come back to it. Now it's interesting, even with the sharpened plane, what I'm finding on this side it's much more difficult to plane. So I can plane down here. That works quite nicely. I'm getting wisps coming off. But as soon as I get to this end, the plane's digging in. And again, I can go this way for here, but come down to this end, and the plane's digging in again. So it's like the figuring's going in two different directions. So what I'm going to do is give this one a rough plane as best I can to make it flat, and I'll flip it over and use the other side as my main flat surface to make the fretboard out of, I think. And that board is now down to around about 7mm, as accurate as I can get it anyway. So now to fetch it off the board now, let's see how this tape is done. So normally, using the double-sided tape, it's a nightmare to get this off. I like to just stick a ruler under it and see. You can feel the tape under there, just to get it going. And then we can just get something like this and just gently lever it off. I don't want to put too much pressure on it, obviously, but there we are. That's coming off quite nicely. And there we go, the tape has just peeled off really nicely. Much better than the double-sided tape, so I think I'll use that technique again. Now that I've got this fretboard to the right thickness, I need to trim the sides down now. What I'm looking for is nice, smooth, flat and parallel, so that I can use a square to mark things out on it. And I'm just going to do it by hand. I could run it through the planer, but I'd be nice and gentle with it. And also it helps get a feel for the wood, so I'm just playing that down now. Now that it's done, I can just check with some of these square ones are quite good, that I've got a consistent parallel set of lines. If it's not quite parallel, I'll take a little bit more off one side or another. Unfortunately, this thing that I bought, it's really good in one sense, but it's marked in inches, which is a real pain. Who uses inches? Apart from the Americans, obviously. So that's just under 3. That's looking fairly consistent, but I will mark a square edge on just to be certain. And to do that on this dark wood, I use a white pencil. So for now, I'll just mark it up so that I know which is the square edge, and I can use that for marking. Also, I've noticed there's a little nasty bit at the end, so I'll make sure to make that the thin end of the fretboard so I can cut that off. Now I know the whole fretboard needs to be 460mm long, and I've got 540 there, so I've got enough room to chop off some bits. So with the square edge to the square edge that I've marked, I'm just going to draw in the knot line, which is going to be there. And it's obviously a very thick line, so it's not the one I'm going to use for actually cutting. It's just to mark out where things are going to go. And then I'll draw a line which is approximately the end at 460, just to give me an idea of the extent of the fretboard. The other thing I can do is compare this to the plan, just to make sure that I'm getting it right. Once I've done that, I can chop it off with a good centimetre to spare either end. Now you see, we so very nearly had a visit from Mr. Cock up there. I measured the distance here, and then I measured from the end, so I would have cut this off at the wrong distance. So that's why it's always worth double checking. Measure twice, cut once. When I compared it to the plan, it was too short. So all I need to do is draw it again, but use the right measurement this time, which takes me up to about there. Scrub that one out, and we'll go to the next stage. And there we are. I've just roughly trimmed the ends on the bandsaw. There's still a big chunk there that I can chop off, and I'm keeping the bits of wood. Yeah, I'm going to use those later. And marking the frets out is next. It's really important to be accurate. So this pencil, no good for that. So what I'm going to do is use a sharp knife And essentially we can mark off the first one using the set square, just with the sharp knife, very carefully. Mark it in there. And you can see there the mark is showing up. I've sanded away the white a little bit now just to make it clear, and you've got a nice mark that we can use as the baseline. So that is the mark at the nut that we can start measuring from. So now I've come inside to do the, the scale lengths and to mark out my fretboard with the lengths to get where all the frets are. It's got to be done accurately. Now on the plan I've got a table that gives me all the different lengths from fret to fret, but I don't want to just trust that. Remember, measure twice, cut once. So what I can do is go to ChatGPT here on my computer. If I type in draw me a table of the scale lengths for a particular size guitar, it will do that. Here's what I typed in: scale length table for a guitar with the scale length that I've got, which is 6 to 8.65, and it's immediately said, oh, that is a Gibson scale, which is good because it is. And then there's the table. So first fret 35.2, second fret 68, etc. That's from the nut, and then obviously the fret to fret distance. I like to use the one from the nut because otherwise you end up with an accumulating error. If you're slightly out on each one, you end up wrong. So it's better to take this table. Now what I can do is compare this table to the one on the plan and make sure that they match. If they don't, then I'm going to have to find a third source. And in fact, you can see these are wrong. So for 22, you've got 453.9, 452.24, so they're wrong. There's a mismatch there. One of these two is wrong. So I'm going to try and find a third source on the internet, because there are lots of distance calculators out there. And there's one here from StewMac. So I've put in the number of frets and the scale length. Better put it into millimeters. Calculate. So now that I've double checked, and I've double checked every single one to make sure they all match, now I'm going to mark them on here. And what I need to do is mark them very carefully. So I've got my extra strong reading glasses, really magnifying, and I'm going to start off by taping the ruler onto the board because I don't want it moving halfway through. When you're measuring to the nearest half a mil or less, then you don't want the ruler moving halfway through. So take a piece of tape and then I'll line it up. That is lined up, ready to go. So then, using a sharp knife, I'm going to measure out and start marking the frets on. And again, I'm going to use the full length and not the incremental length. So the first one is 35.28, 35, just beyond, I'm going to make a mark there that I can just about see. It's just a little mark with a knife. Next one, 68.59, 66, 7, 8.5. There's a limit to how accurately you can mark these. Now you can buy gauges that have all these marked on already, and you just line them up with the jig and saw. I like to do it individually because then you can change the scale length. You can add a 5mm onto the scale length if you want to, shrink it, grow it, and this formula will always work. So you'll always get a guitar that works properly. Right, I'm going to do the rest of these. Okay, those are all marked now, but what I'm going to do, starting at this end, I'm going to find each mark, I'm going to read off what it is, I'm going to check down the table that it's correct and make sure I've got them all right. It's very easy when you're dealing in millimeters to just miscount. So get 1 millimeter instead of 0.1, that kind of thing. So double check them all, and then once that's done, you can just look at it to make sure they look right as well. If one looks wildly out, you'll know something's wrong. So going through them all once again. Now that that's done, I can take off the tape finally. move the ruler out of the way. And now, because I've got a square edge marked here, I can now take each one of those lines and I can draw it on with my sharp knife very accurately. Like that. And I'm going to do that for each one all the way down. And there we are. You can angle it so that you can see it in the light, but all the frets are now marked. As a final check, I take my ruler again, tape it back down. I'm going to re-measure everything to make sure they're all correct. So that's the fretboard marked out. One more thing to do this episode, and it's something that's left over from the last one, which is to cut out the shape of the headstock. So my router bits have finally arrived, so let's move on to that. Stuck this on here, stuck the template on in exactly the right place, lined it up with the various lines, and I've got in the router, I've got a router bit with a bearing on. I just got a little one, and the idea is, and I've lined it up so, and this is just a flush cutter, so it'll just cut anything flush with what's the bearings on. The bearings on the template, so it'll cut away this. And I've just got it so it's just taking just a little bit off the top. So we'll just slowly push it down and down, just taking a skim at a time. So if I try and bite too much off, obviously it'll kick. And I think I may have bent the bit last time trying to do that. So bit by bit, and it should be better. And there we go, that's done. So let's remove the top now. My favourite method again, just using a steel rule. That comes off, this comes off, and there is the shape of the head. Let's take the clamp off so I can show you properly. And there we go, one perfectly shaped guitar head. It'll need a little bit of work on this top bit here, because obviously the router bit wasn't thin enough to go straight down there, but that'll be easy enough to do. And there we are. And there's obviously a little bit here on the collars where it starts to get too deep for the router to reach. I could have put a different bit on, but that'll clean up really easily with a chisel. So there we are. So I think that's enough for one episode. We've got the fretboard marked out and thinned down. We've got the headstock marked out and cut. So that's done. The next one is going to be looking at cutting the fret slots, and also thinking about the scary bit, which is adding the mother of pearl inlays down the fretboard. Not sure how I'm going to do that yet. Okay, so give me a like if you liked it. Press subscribe if you want to, and then maybe I'll see you next time.